everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Southern Discomfort. I'm your host with the ghost, the paranormal pastor, Ezekiel Kincade. And we're going to give everybody a chance to hop on chat. So if you're in there, give us a big hello so we can see you and tell you hello back. Thank you for joining us. Old and new alike. Everybody welcome.
So far we got Jason.
Welcome, Jason. Thanks for popping in, man. We are good. Ready to get another show kicked off here and talk about some more cool and interesting topics as we continue to look at supernatural beings like demons and Satan and watchers, and kind of tracing their origin and history and their understanding. And Dustin is here with me too.
Yep. I'm just behind the scenes helping him out. And we're slowly getting our crew back and ready in full swing. So one happens to be, what would it be called? Either grand fur babies or fur baby nephews. She has a whole 7 of them that were born that she's puppy sitting.
And she's gonna have her hands full, man.
Yeah, and then YOBABY's resting and recovering from her Alabama trip last night. She didn't go home until 3:30 in the morning.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Good to see you here, Jason. Please don't hesitate to ask questions later on. Zeke usually pauses after about 10 minutes or so of talking so people can ask questions. I'm not as good as the ladies, YOBABY and VICKIE. I'm telling you, they're pros at this. So bear with me.
Oh, you got it, man.
Let's see. And what was I going to do for? Oh, yeah, I want to get a banner going across that screen right there. Welcome to the show. Thank you. Right there. Yep, that'll work. We'll go with this one.
There you go.
And since we got Zeke and he likes the color, let's see if we can go with the orangey. We'll go with orangey. There we go.
And you switch the color up.
Kind of go with the background and
yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of nifty things you can do on here. Oh, Spotted Ghost. Hello.
All right. Good to have you back with us, Spotted Ghost. Thanks for popping in.
We're looking forward to the near future when you can pop up. Hey, Jessica Moon.
Hey, Jessica. Thanks for hopping in.
Hey, PW says Paranormal Pastor Zeke.
Hey, PW. It's good to see you as always.
Hey, PW. And Jason, I just noticed something here. Hold on. What happened? Well, I've been going through and doing a bunch of changes and stuff on here. So, but you shouldn't have been changed because you're a good guy and you always shout us out on your channel. So there you go. You should be blue. Again, I don't know why you weren't blue. I think YouTube does it sometimes. If you can, Jason, type something if you don't mind. You're too good of a supporter, and I said, you're always shouting us out. So
yeah, let's see if the special badge works for him.
Yeah, he's even had me up on his panel before for us.
Awesome.
Yeah, so and I got all the proper links in tonight's description. Unlike last night, I had a mishap. I copied it and it only pasted half of the info. And I was like, oh my god. So I had to go through and fix that midstream.
That's all right, man. We got it all worked out.
Mm-hmm. And Brandon's back again, so we're glad to see him.
Brandon popped up in chat. He there?
No, he was on panel last night.
Oh, I thought you were saying he was in chat. I knew he was on panel last night.
Yeah. I'm sending him a message now.
I didn't want to miss telling him, hey, if he was in there.
Yeah, he's going to try and come back to Mondays with us again.
Awesome.
Yep. All right. Jason is blue again. Sorry about that, Jason. So I don't know. This is the YouTube world. We got 5, so I know there's a whole lot of people that decided they're live tonight, so they'll be trickling in probably after that. And
yeah.
There's Brandon right there.
All right. Hey, Brandon. Thanks for coming by tonight, man. But yeah, Dustin, I think we'll give it a few more minutes, and then I'll kick things off.
All right. And I was going to say, if you don't mind, if Brandon is available and he don't mind helping out, you don't mind him being behind the scene like I am, you could have him up if you wanted.
Whatever works, man. I am good with him being on.
You want the link, Brandon? Because he's really good at keeping up with comments, too. Yeah, you got a lot of rain down there, PW. I've been watching radar. He's going to check and see if he can. Well, you can be like me. We're not even on the screen. We're just behind. I got him soloed out. We're just
yeah, he doesn't have to show his face. You don't want to.
Yeah, because see, that's how we do it. Just it'll be you're up here with me like that, and then we just solo him out. Okay, I'm gonna send him a link. I gotta get it again because I've done so much.
Well, once Dustin does that, we'll get kicked off. So everybody, go ahead and get geared up. I'm gonna let you know what we're gonna be doing tonight, and make a couple announcements.
Hey, Myers, good to see ya. Myers is here.
All right, welcome back, Myers.
Gonna be a good show tonight. He's already said what it's gonna be about. Hey, and you got Clarissa in here.
Hey, Clarissa.
We're up to 10. Let Brandon get up in here real quick so that way we don't have to interrupt you as you're talking and unsolo you and solo you back again. Look at GS comment. What, did I miss it? See, that's why let me go over here on the YouTube side and look. What did I miss? I'm sorry. Oh, oh, G's. Okay, G's. You meant G's. All right. I'll get with you. Send me send us the info, and I'll look at it after the show. Yeah, the 21st is my birthday, so okay. Well, I appreciate it, G. Okay, I'm sorry, Zeke. We got another YouTuber that wants to interview us, so it'll be good. Another way to.
Awesome, man.
All right, I'm waiting for Brandon. I texted you the link. He said GS. I thought he meant spotted ghost and just kind of flipped it, but G is paranormal search.
Okay.
He goes around a bunch of places too, and he's got some good locations. So while we wait for him, you want to do a quick recap again on what you're going to talk about?
Yep. So what we've been doing on Tuesday nights and Sunday, going through the Book of Enoch, have meant to complement each other. And so on Tuesday nights, we've been doing an in-depth study, kind of going through the Old Testament and then some of the writings that were between the Testaments where there were some major theological developments when it comes to Satan and demons, and then looking at how that carried into the New Testament. So we've kind of been circling back and forth between the Old Testament and these intertestamental period writings, kind of making sure that we're getting our bearings and covering some good ground to prepare us for the next transition that we'll eventually go into and looking at the New Testament. So tonight we are going to be back in the Old Testament, and we are actually going to start looking at the development of Satan. Now, if you recall, what we've been mainly focusing on is all of the different spirit beings in the Old Testament. And we have looked at how the modern concept of demons is not found in the Old Testament. We talked about the different Hebrew words, all the different type of dark entities that are mentioned in the Old Testament. And then we looked in the intertestamental period and how a lot of these ideas and beings started to get conflated into one being simply because of the language barrier and the Greek translators. When they're translating the Old Testament into Greek, they're having to just kind of pick certain words that they think are going to work in describing these spirit entities. So we've covered that, and that's setting us up when we get into the New Testament. So over the next few weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do the same thing with what we call Satan, this Satan figure, full-blown arch nemesis of God, serpent in the garden, the accuser, the source of all evil. We're going to start to trace his development, and it's even more fascinating than some of the other stuff that we have began to study. So we're going to be doing that the next couple weeks on Tuesday nights. Sundays we're still going to be going through the Book of Enoch. But before we get started tonight, just a reminder to everybody, I did have some new books drop on Godless. Brandon.
Hello.
Some new books drop on Godless. So I have Johnny Walker Ranger Demon Slayer Volume 2, and I have Southern Discomfort issue number 4. Those are up there. You can get Johnny Walker Ranger Volume 2 for really cheap right now. It's not coming out in paperback until around Father's Day, so this coming weekend. So if you like doing ebooks, Godless is the place to go get my stuff. It's really discounted, very cheap. So those are available. But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and jump into the Old Testament. But before we do, I want to clear a couple things up from Sunday's teaching on Enoch that I just want to make sure people understand, because it can be very, very, very confusing. So y'all follow with me just for a second. This has to do with our discussion. So when we looked Sunday in the book of Enoch, we were focusing on Azazel. And we talked about how there was this competing tradition between, in that time period, who they saw as the arch nemesis of God. You had some who said it was Azazel. Some called this being Mastema or Belial. And then later on in that period, they begin to refer to him as Satan. And here's where the confusion comes in. First of all, we have to realize during this time period that Enoch was written, it's one of those intertestamental books. There was not a full-fledged theology of Satan like there is in the New Testament. What we see is glimpses of this theology being developed. What we also see in the book of Enoch, Satan is not used as a proper noun. It is used as kind of describing what these beings are, that they were adversaries now. Because there's a passage we looked at Enoch that referred to all the watchers as Satans. All right, they're not proper names. It's just describing them as adversaries. And when it says Azazel is the chief Satan, it's not saying Azazel is Satan as we have understood him, come to understand him in the New Testament. It is simply saying that Azazel is the chief over these. He's the chief adversary. And the other thing I pointed out in the passages of Enoch to show that there, for lack of a better word, if you want to call it demonology, Satanology, was not highly developed, we see that they even assigned another fallen watcher as being the serpent in the garden. So what you have is pieces of all these things that were eventually rolled up into one and presented as Satan, the proper name as we know him today. So in Enoch, you just have bits and pieces of this starting to rise. So is Azazel Satan? No, not in the way that he has come to be understood, who we refer to as Satan in the New Testament. Azazel was a chief rebel angel. And as I said, they're still working all of this theology out in that time period. So while Enochian tradition started to understand as Azazel being this leader rebel angel, they didn't see him as the full-blown Satan of the New Testament. There's no way they could have, because that thought process wasn't even developed yet. So I wanted to go back and explain that, because it can be confusing, especially when we are looking at this time period. So know that when we start to discuss Satan and the intertestamental period in this time period, we're looking at how these thought processes were starting to develop and would eventually lead them to this full-blown theology of Satan as we know him today. So I just wanted to make sure we cleared that up from Sunday, because we're going to keep circling around this topic, and it's going to keep coming up over the next couple weeks, and I don't want anybody to be confused or feel like they don't know what's going on. I want to make sure that I am communicating that as best as I can. So Azazel is not Satan as we know him. According to these writings, Azazel was a chief watcher that helped them go on and develop this Satan tradition. I hope that makes sense. So just go ahead and open it up. Make sure everybody's tracking with me, Dustin and Brandon.
All righty.
Leave anybody in the dust. I just want to, we're going to come back to this topic over the weeks. But right now, I just want to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying.
Let's see. And I posted your goddess link too, and I pinned it to the top of the chat.
Can I mention something?
Go for it.
So back in the Roman times, the word Lucifer means obviously, you know, like the light bringer. So he was essentially a sun god. I don't know how that really correlates with Satan. I do know that, well, in my personal research, Satan and Lucifer seems to be two different entities whenever it comes in terms of you know, demonaltry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if like, so what is your personal opinions on that?
You brought up a question that is perfect for tonight, Brandon. So thank you for mentioning that. What we're going to look at, hopefully we'll get to it tonight. If not, for sure next week. But we're going to look at those passages. There's a passage in Isaiah where Lucifer is not in the original text. Lucifer is a Latin translation of something in the Hebrew. And so this name, Lucifer, being attributed to Satan, was a later Christian development. It's not found in the original text. And what we're going to look at in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, it's debated if even those texts are even talking about any type of rebellious angelic figure. So, yeah, this idea and this name of Lucifer and Satan being a light bearer, like this is something that in the early days was never, like, a name never attributed.
Right. And I mean, I've always associated the name Lucifer to be an air elemental. Because I mean, essentially that's what a lot of you know, different various, you know, traditions teach, that, you know, him being actually a you know, like a sun god and stuff like that. However, that it's not Christian. It's not Christian based.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Satan is.
Yes.
Satan would be.
Yes.
But.
Yes. The yeah, like we'll see, the Lucifer term was something developed later, and I don't think should be applied to Satan. Right. So, you know, if it's a term that can be used in other ways, but I think when we apply this term to Satan and we apply these passages out of Isaiah and Ezekiel to Satan, which I'm going to give you a couple opinions on that, but I don't think they should be applied to him, because I think it just adds more to the confusion.
Right, confusion
over what's already so much muddied water because of English translations. It doesn't help it doesn't help things. It doesn't make it more clear, if that makes sense.
And I want to just go ahead and say, I got it highlighted up there for everybody to see, to make sure they know too. And I'll highlight it throughout the stream on and off for anyone entering. But we do encourage everyone to ask questions. Zeke is very humble, and I guarantee no one is going to be made to feel dumb or anything. There's no such thing as a dumb question here.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about learning.
Especially when it comes to this stuff, because it can be complicated.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is we can only go off the literature that we have, and sometimes there's some major theological jumps that happen that we're left in the dark about, because it either wasn't preserved or nobody wrote down that tradition of how it became that way. So a lot of it is just scholars trying to connect the dots, and when you're going back and forth from different languages and how to translate a term, it can be a lot. So, you know, so I always say, no stupid questions, especially in something like this that can be confusing and a little bit complicated at times. But I am doing my best to try to communicate this in a way that is going to both challenge you, but also in a way that you can understand what is being communicated.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are we going to, or did you ever discuss anything about the Enochian keys?
We haven't talked about the keys yet.
Okay. So we're not there yet.
No, and I'm trying to remember if that was a development, because we're only doing the first book of Enoch. And I'm trying to think if that was something that was in there or that was in the latter books of Enoch, because you have two other books that were attributed to Enoch, but they were written like way later. Yeah.
Right. There's actually the modified version, and then there's the original. But I mean, the original is probably extremely hard to even comprehend. I don't know. I haven't even personally seen it or even read it. I've only know about the modified.
Yeah.
And Spotted asked you a question too, Zeke. Well, before you continue on, are Lucifer and Beelzebub just names for Satan? I.e., if Satan was type of person, his or her name is Lucifer or blah.
Yeah, Beelzebub was a title that was given to him in the Gospels. Lucifer, like we were mentioned, was a title that was attributed to Satan much later, based off of a Latin translation of a verse. So you're going to see in the New Testament that Satan goes by Satan, the devil. He's mentioned as Belial once, and he also goes by Beelzebub in the gospel. So, yeah, these are all talking about the same entity.
All right.
Was you going to say something, Brandon?
Oh, yeah. There's actually 3 names for Beelzebub. There's also Beelzebub, Beelzebuth, and also Beelzebath. It is essentially he was a demon that was blamed for the possession of some nuns in old London a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And he's considered chief of the false gods. I've personally never heard of Satan being referred to as Beelzebub.
Yeah,
so that's new information for me too.
That is definitely from the Christian tradition, and Beelzebub developing as a demon, a separate demon away from Satan, was a later development.
Right.
So like what we're looking at is simply just the origin, how these terms were first applied, and I'm kind of only going up to New Testament times. I'm not really going much after that in later developments.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Beelzebub was. Let me find those verses real quick, and I can tell everybody what verses those are in if they want to look it up. 1 second.
And don't forget, about every 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, whenever he's in between each one, he pauses for your questions. So your next round of questions, you'll have time to think about them. And
yeah, it looks
like go get a Sprite.
There's a mention in Matthew chapter 10, and it looks like Matthew chapter 12. where Beelzebub
Myth.
is mentioned.
Okay, so where Satan was referred to as Beelzebub.
Yes,
I
that was.
Wow, that's very interesting.
I typed it in the chat for you, so that way, well, as you keep going, people can go back and look and see it.
Yeah, thanks, man. But yeah, this whole concept of his development is quite interesting, and you're going to see some crazy stuff starting from the Old Testament and then how we end up in the New Testament. It's really, really fascinating. But for those of you who watched some of the earlier episodes, we're going to kind of bring this back up for those of you who have forgotten. But we did a word study on the literal word Satan in the Old Testament. And what we found is that based upon the Hebrew grammar, that none of those words translated Satan should be proper names. That everything in them around the grammar, except for maybe one verse, shows that Satan can just mean a challenger or opposer. And it can be referred to a human opposer, or it can be referred to a supernatural opposer. So it's wrong for us to go back to the Hebrew and read our current understanding or our current theology of Satan into that text, because in the ancient Near East, in the Hebrews, they would not have understood the term Satan the way that we understood it today. It would have not been a proper name, and it would not have been this chief arch nemesis of God, because in the Old Testament, their theology, they didn't have this one chief arch nemesis of God. That was something that is later developed in the intertestamental period, with the book of Enoch and Jubilees and other such writings during that time period. So when we go back and we see this word Satan in the Old Testament, it is used as an accuser, and it's used to refer to a supernatural opposer, or it is used to refer to a human opposer. And in one instance, it's even used of Yahweh himself as opposing something that he didn't find pleasing or approve of. So this name can be applied to all kinds of different people and circumstances and entities depending on what they're doing in any given situation. So the Satan in the Old Testament just means someone who opposes. Now, this is important because we're going to look at one of the most famous passages of Scripture in the Old Testament that is used to say that Satan is in the Old Testament, and that is the book of Genesis. We have the garden scenario with the serpent and with the snake. Now, obviously, later on, right, the New Testament does make this connection, and it does equate Satan, the full-blown Satan that we know him today, the New Testament Satan. It does link him back to the garden. All right, our purpose for today is to not look at how the New Testament authors understood this passage, but how it was understood by the Old Testament audience in its ancient culture in its day. So they would have not seen a Satan figure like we know it in the serpent in the garden. So when we come to this passage, we need to get that out of our mind so that we can, just for the sole purpose of trying to see this passage of Scripture as how the ancients would have seen it and understand it. That way we can make sure that we understand the text properly and then go from there and see how the later theology was developed. So a lot of us are familiar with this story. You have this garden paradise that God creates. He sets Adam and Eve in the middle of it, tells them not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but they are permitted to eat from the tree of life. And then we have the serpent comes into the garden. He tempts Adam and Eve. They're cast out of the garden. They lost their garden home. They have to go out into the land of the wilderness, where all the chaos is, all the dark entities. They've lost that sacred sanctuary space in the garden. So, looking at this passage of scripture with the snake in the garden, there are a couple things that I want to point out. All right, remember, this is an ancient Near East document, and a lot of the ancient Near East, they borrowed each other's symbolism and things like that. And a snake was one of these creatures that carried heavy significance and symbolism in all of the surrounding cultures, including the Hebrews. And so when we look at this, we need to take into account how the serpent was seen throughout the surrounding cultures. So what I'm going to do is, I've got my notes here. I'm going to give you some ways that the ancients understood this serpent-like creature that was in the garden. I'm going to give you two different interpretations, and that I think are the most valid and best interpretations in trying to understand this in the context. But anyway, when we examine all of the other writings during this time period, they are full of serpent and snake imagery. One tale y'all might be familiar with is the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Akkadian tale of Adapa. There have these snakes that are guardians of a palace, and this guardian in that story, it takes this shape of a serpent, and it's known as this type of guardian being or guardian demon, and it lives in the netherworld. So what we're going to see here with the serpent is there's not really a lot of negative imagery associated with it, but what we are going to see is that there was always this common link to the underworld or the netherworld, that there was some type of supernatural aspect to it. So this beast of the field that it is called, just by the fact that it being in this garden episode with this type of exalted language and drawing off the symbolism of the surrounding cultures, this thing is more than just a beast of the field. There is something otherworldly associated. So when the Hebrews would have seen this serpent in this context, in a garden story, in a story that has to do with a serpent talking, they would have immediately made the connection that this is not a real beast of the field, that there's some kind of supernatural underworld connection here going on. A lot of you probably know this, but it does bear mentioning. In Egypt cultures, the serpents were related to wisdom and death, right? You see them on the pharaoh's crowns. They are talked about all throughout the book of the dead. And they are these kind of treacherous beings that are along in the book of the dead, these treacherous beings that are along the path in the road to get to the afterlife. So these serpents must be dealt with. see more on the Book of the Dead. I'm going to save that. In Genesis 3:14, right, this is when the curse is put upon Adam and Eve and the serpent. And God tells the serpent that you were going to crawl on your belly. Now, I am willing to bet that every single person in the sound of my voice has probably come across the outlandish theory that has been drawn from this over the years that, well, what this verse teaches is that Satan, this snake, had legs, and it walked around with legs, and then it was cursed and it lost its legs and it crawls on its belly. And that's what the curse meant. God was taking away the serpent's legs. Nothing could be further from the truth than what is being taught here about this curse. So we're going to look at this curse real quick, that God sentences the serpent to crawl on its belly. We talked about the Book of the Dead. In Egypt, they also have what's called these Egyptian pyramid texts. And they were meant to aid the pharaohs. This was an Old Kingdom writing. And so it was meant to aid the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom on their journey into the afterlife. And there are several dozen, there's all these spells and these curses for snakes that they can cast on snakes that would try to hinder the king's progress. And one of the spells that is called down on a snake in order to make it lie down and to make it docile is that it is to go, you can make it go with its face on the path, that you can make it get down, crawl away. This idea here, crawling on your belly, we see it in Genesis, and we see the parallels here. So what is happening with the curse on Genesis? The serpent is not losing its legs. The idea here with the curse is that when God tells this serpent to crawl on its belly, there's no suggestion it ever had legs or that anything was being taken away from him. Instead, the curse is meant to say that the serpent is going to be docile. Now, rather than in a striking position, ready to hit, the serpent has been laid to rest. He's been made docile, that he is no longer a threat. So this is what's going on here. What we'll look at in just a second is in the ancient Near East, the serpents were considered these type of chaos creatures. They were almost amoral. Like they weren't necessarily fully evil and they weren't necessarily fully good. They came to bring chaos. And we see this theme in Genesis, right? We have in chapter 1 where it says that the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And it says that the earth was formless and void. And the Hebrew literally means there, it was in a chaotic state. So what happens is God in Genesis 1, he comes into this chaotic state and he starts to speak order in it. And he starts to give purpose and function in order to a creation. And he's got this whole order set up. And then he creates a garden. Right? The gardens were the places, the dwelling places of the gods. The gardens were meant to be like temples in the ancient Near East, and every god would place his image in that garden or in that sacred space. And this is what God does with Adam and Eve. Human beings were created in his image, meant to be his image bearers in that sacred space. So you have the garden. Everything is in order. Outside the garden is chaos, wilderness, death, destruction, murder. all these evil entities. And then what happens is we have one of these wilderness creatures, a chaos creature, makes its way into the garden. And what happens? We go from chaos to order to chaos again. The garden home is lost. But instead of creation being in chaos, now what is in chaos is man's relationship with God. And this curse comes along after the serpent has caused all of this chaos and destruction. The curse comes along and pretty much says, your days are done. Like, you are a defeated foe. I am humbling you. You will no longer strike, but you're going to be laid on your belly. In essence, this is a way of showing that the serpent has been tamed and the serpent will be defeated and dealt with. The other thing it says here, after crawling on your belly, it says that the serpent will eat dust. All right, so this isn't talking about snacks like that the snakes like. It's not like, hey, I want to go have a dust sandwich here. I like dust. It's a pretty good thing now. God cursed me with this curse. So now all I want to do is sit here and eat dust all day long on the couch. It's not like that. So what scholars have said is that this is a reference more than likely to their habitat, especially when you look in the pyramid text that we were just talking about earlier. So it is an attempt to banish the serpent, right? We talked about his authority, him being brought down and docile. And the eating on the dust is to say that it is banished. Now, and these serpents, as I said, these creatures of the netherworld, they were connected to the realm of the dead. And those people in the netherworld, right? So listen, I want to make sure I communicate this right. Serpents in the netherworld, people in the netherworld were typically portrayed in the pyramid text as eating dust. It was supposed to show how desolate a place that this underworld is. And in several other places in ancient Near East, it does the same thing in their writings. It equates this dust of the netherworld as their food, as their bread. And so what's happening here is the serpent is being condemned back to where it belongs. You came into this garden. You weren't supposed to be here. You came in. You caused chaos. So now you've struck. So now I'm going to make you docile, and you are returning to the underworld. Go back and eat dust. Go back where you came from is essentially what Yahweh is telling the serpent. And then the crush your head verse, if you look ahead in verse 3:15, it talks about the serpent's head being crushed. Again, this same type of phrase is found in these pyramid texts, and it's used to refer to overcoming or defeating the serpent. The idea here is that this statement is to reflect a mortal blow on the serpent. And so this helps us understand how somebody in the ancient Near East would have viewed that phrase. All right, so the Satan, not the Satan, sorry. The serpent, he is cursed, docile, eat dust, go back to where you belong, and your head's going to be crushed. You are going to be defeated. And then, of course, there's the famous "you'll strike his heel" passage in the end of 3:15. This was meant to show that the strike on the heel, could be a deadly blow. So there still has to be some trepidation and being on guard around this chaos creature. Um, so this is the connection. I'm showing you all this to show how it is connected to all these ancient cultures and how they all borrowed from each other and used the same imagery because that was the worldview that they had. And so they used this imagery in order to communicate theological truths. And this is what the Hebrews are doing. They're like, hey, this is common mode of language in our day. So we're going to use these truths to communicate truths about God and this chaos creature and what happened with Adam and Eve. So before I move on, do we have any questions about the text that we just looked at? There's still more I'm going to talk about in this passage with the serpent. So there's more coming. I just want to give us a chance to catch up.
I don't believe so. And I think it might help too. I've been tagging it there in the box below you for the books and chapters and all that you're discussing, so people can follow along as you're talking about it. I don't see any yet. If they pop them in there, I can highlight them for you.
I have a common question that a lot of people would ask.
Go for it.
Well, so whenever you hear of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, right? You know, a lot of people say that, oh, you know, it was Satan that took form of a serpent. But was that Satan, or was that more of like a you know, more of like a how you say another word for like temptation, like a representation of temptation.
Okay, so yeah, was it more a representation of Satan, or is it a representation of
right, their own temptation
coming up on our own?
Exactly.
The way that this passage is going to start to be understood throughout its historical development, as there is something sinister behind, something supernatural behind the serpent that is a real type of entity. We're going to see that development start to take place in the intertestamental period, and we'll look at that some next week. But we see it full blown, definitely, in the New Testament. Now, there is, and this is a perfect time to bring this up, Brandon. So this is great. There is another line of interpretation that draws off the ancient Near East setting, but it goes in a little bit of a different direction than seeing the serpent as a chaos creature. And this has to get into how the Hebrew word for serpent here can be translated and used. The Hebrew word is nakash. And the line of argument that I just presented to you, y'all have heard me mention John Walton before. He's a very, very great Old Testament, ancient Near East scholar. The direction he goes with this, and that other scholars follow, is the direction I just told you, that the serpent is a chaos creature. And he goes on to compare it to other chaos creatures in the Bible, like Leviathan. Leviathan was a serpent. And he goes on and kind of does everything that I just told you about the ancient Near East surrounding culture, that he kind of ends up with, yeah, the serpent is some sort of supernatural being, basically this amoral chaos creature that eventually developed into be a representation of Satan. There's another line of thought by another scholar. Y'all heard me mention him, Michael S. Heiser, another one of my favorites that I highly respect. He differs with Walton on this. He says that the Nakash could be referring to a type of glorious being. and not so much a chaos creature. And he appeals to the idea of the garden being the home in the dwelling place of God, but also the dwelling place of the divine council, right? Y'all have heard us talk about that. Yahweh has his divine council. This is what the sons of God and watchers were. They were involved in helping with the decision making. And because you have this garden home, you have this temple, and God and the divine council was there, Michael Heiser states that it's, it fits the text well to have one of these council members coming down and acting this way. This would fit with the role that we see of the accuser in the book of Job. And we'll end up talking about that one later on, but we're not going to jump ahead of ourselves. So Heiser sees something more of a supernatural being. And he argues that this is why the New Testament goes back and reads Satan into this garden story, because they would have understood the Nakash as something more than just a serpent, something more than just a chaos creature. Like I said, John Walton argues the opposite. He says, no, the only connection that this thing is any type of supernatural creature is the chaos creature that has a connection to the underworld. So both of them make very, very good arguments. I respect both of them highly, but I am a guy who is big on context. And because of that, I lean towards John Walton's interpretation. That doesn't mean that I am right. I am open to being wrong, and I still go back and study this, and I'm trying to learn more of my Hebrew and get that better under wraps, because when they start getting into this high level functioning grammar, I'm not quite at their level yet with Hebrew. So I want to be able to understand it more, because maybe Michael Heiser is right. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. But until then, I understand the serpent. I understand that the readers of that day would have understood the serpent to be this type of chaos creature that is kind of morally ambiguous, comes in, does his thing, and then the curse is pronounced on him he'll be defeated and to go back to the underworld. So I'll stop there for any questions. Make sure I explain that well.
We got Ms. Molly,
Molly.
in the stream.
Thank you for coming, Molly.
Hello, Molly. I don't have any questions on that one. It doesn't seem like anyone else does.
Yeah,
but if anyone does,
I just don't want to leave anybody in the dust, so to speak, since we're talking about dust.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. From which we came, we will return.
All right. Well, if nobody has any more questions, we'll kind of start wrapping this this text in Genesis up a little bit. So this serpent is a creature of non-order. He is a chaos creature. Like I said, for me, I think there's just so many things in the text and in the surrounding context that point to this idea of the serpent being the chaos creature and not one of the divine council members. But again, like I said, I could be wrong, and I'm still studying, and I'm open to that. This is just kind of my conclusion as of right now, based on the years that I have put in studying this. So we have this this rebellion, right? The chaos creature. We've looked at the other angelic rebellion in Enoch, and from Genesis 6. We looked at that Sunday, and then there's a couple more that are going to come up in Deuteronomy 32, talking about the sons of God and the events at Babel. And there's a psalm that talks about this event and the sons of God being judged for how they have not ruled the nations well. So when we look at the Old Testament, y'all, what we see is there are three types of rebellions that are presented that have some sort of supernatural aspect to it, and that can somehow be related to the problem of human sin and wickedness in the world. The first one we just looked at was the chaos creature in the garden. The second one, Genesis 6, we looked at last week. And the third one is going to come into play. You'll see me refer to it as we go further into the study about the sons of God ruling the nations, and they did not do well, so they are chastised for it. I think what we're going to do is I'm not going to jump into those passages in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 tonight because I don't want to rush through it. So we will look at those next week and to see if there is a satanic rebellion in that passage. Like, for those of you who are not familiar with it, go back and read before next week, if you have a chance, read Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28, when Ezekiel takes up his lament against the king of Tyre, Tyre, not Tire. He's going to take up this lament, and in it, we see some references to some stuff that happened in the garden. And later Christian commentators over the years started to connect these verses with the serpent imagery. And this is where the idea came that Satan was a cherub who fell. So these verses play a huge part into the later Christian tradition that developed that Satan was a fallen cherub who rebelled in the Garden of Eden. So it's going to be important to look at these passages and to see if they're really teaching that, and to see if they really can be connected to what's going on in the garden, or if it is wrong to try to make that connection. So that's what you have to look forward to next week.
And with serpents, you can't really forget Leviathan. That's also mentioned in the book of Enoch. And essentially is respond. Whoa, okay, I apologize. Something just moved on my wall.
Oh, we need to cut the show. Let's start an investigation right now. Switching gears.
I have this Native American drone flute. You know what I'm talking about? That has two different tones to it.
Yeah.
And it just fell. It just fell. I mean, that thing's been up there for months. I don't know. Okay. But yeah, it's like you said, it's the embodiment of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And that all kind of ties together, and it just apparently is considered a demon associated with envy. But yeah, that's actually really interesting how it does all tie together, and especially being in the book of Enoch, and being in a description of the embodiment of chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
with the serpents.
that is what is so fascinating about that time period when Enoch is written, man. Like, they just, like, the theological ground and imagination was very fertile.
Right.
And so we get a lot of insight about how they understood these Old Testament texts. And then we see them making their own innovations with it as well. And they, are starting to piece together kind of all of these different angelic rebellions and all of these different types of chaos creatures mentioned. And, we just see the dots for them starting to connect, and we see this this trajectory going forward, and you can tell where it's headed, especially knowing the end product in the New Testament. So it's really, really, really cool to see. But yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, that chain link there, and I mean, the serpent is also mentioned in a lot of other things, like Norse mythology and just all types of things, and it is kind of similar to devourment.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of similarities whenever it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when you, in the ancient Near East, you got all these cultures kind of jam packed there in one small area around each other. They had this, it's not right or wrong. It's just their culture. It's how they understood things. It was the language of the day, for them in that area. The serpents were either these kind of amoral creatures, or they were, beings that got in your way in the netherworld when you're trying to get past them. And so and it's like the verses I pointed out, like once you understand the ancient Near East context, and then you see those verses of like crawl on your belly, eat the dust, crush the head, and you're like, oh, this makes perfect sense considering the culture it was written in.
Right.
That's exactly what they would have done to a chaos creature.
Yes.
And I guess that's why I go towards John Walton's interpretation, because I'm sitting there looking at this and looking at these other texts. It's like, yeah, this is a chaos creature. This is what would be said to it and done to make it go away, to make it, to lose its power and influence.
Right. It's like some type of like a reference to some type of a banishment or something.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why it's so important, and that's why I'm taking my time with this, to look at these texts, and to if we just take a little bit of time to see the context and see what's there, number one, the dots connect and the things make sense in the story that have, confounded people for a long time, but stuff that scholars have been knowing about, it just never trickles its way down. So like understanding this stuff and taking the time to look at it, and it opens your eyes to a whole new world and a whole new way of looking at things. And that's why I'm so passionate about doing this. It's like, helping people see what's there and see the dots connect. And it's like wow, I never saw it that way before. And it's like, yeah, because it's not being talked about or taught, and it needs to be.
Right. Yeah.
Now I've lost track because the past few months have been so sporadic and not so much going on for a little bit of all of us. But I believe this is like probably close to like your 30th episode now. What are your feelings from when you first started to now? Are you glad you started doing this? Do you feel that, there's going to be the future holds so much potential to be able to get more word out and to teach people? Do you have any regrets, or like what's your feelings about this?
I'm 100% glad that we did this, man. Like, I wasn't sure how interested people would be in the topic, because when I've taught this in churches in the past, it's been like, get hear the crickets. So I wasn't sure how it was going to go over, but I mean, it has been very well received, and the comments and feedbacks of how much people have liked this and how helpful it has been just keeps me excited about doing this and to keep on, and to see that people do appreciate learning these things. And so we're gonna continue pushing on, and hopefully get more and more of this out there so people can learn. And so I'm very excited.
I feel,
Yeah, with the crickets in church and stuff. I think that if the pews were just a little bit more comfortable, I think there'd be less crickets.
well,
Yeah.
and another
I don't know.
what I think is so great about social media is you've got a lot of people that may go to those structures, those places of worship, but they may be too afraid to ask questions of more detail out of fear of ridicule and how dare you, and to where here people are behind a screen and on a keyboard, they can feel more comfortable, more relaxed to ask questions, or to can you be a little bit more specific on this, or what do you mean by that, and why isn't this talked about more?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with people kicked off their Sundays shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, if like they're more comfortable, they're in their place, they're in their house, talking about these types of subjects. You're at your home, you're at your place, you can actually think about it. You know what I mean? You can really think about it and dwell on it and study it.
Yeah. And
And
before I forget, Teresa says, I appreciate you giving your time for us to learn, Zeke.
Oh, you're welcome, Teresa. Like I said before, when Teresa's been up, she is actually a former member of one of the congregations I used to be at. So we've stayed friends over the years. So
That's
I'm
cool.
oh, that's cool.
glad to see her in here. Yeah, absolutely.
And she agrees 100% with me on that too, about the comfort level of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think y'all are spot on about that. So, the other surprise I will have for y'all next week is I know that there are people out there who have been missing the Tuesday horror reading that we used to have. So next week, I'm going to break out a little bit, some of my stories, and I'm going to be reading you snippets of it. I'll be reading some of Johnny Volume 2 and some of my new stuff that I've had released, kind of wet your whistles a little bit.
Little teaser.
So I'll be throwing some of that back in there. Do have some more local investigations I'm trying to plan, and so we will be doing some more of that in the future as well, to kind of break things up so we're not being hit with an intellectual fire hydrant.
Yeah, right.
Every week, 2 times a week now.
Exactly. A little break in between. Little break. That's good. That's good. And I don't know. I don't see anyone else asking. Everyone's pretty much listening at this point. So,
Chad's dead.
Killed it. But no,
all right, who's gonna do the unicorn fluffer fart? We got to get everyone going again. Get that chat active. Hey, Jimbo.
Hello, JMO.
Hey, JMO.
He says, I have been looking for this information.
Well, like I said, too, the scholars you want to read, JMO, John H. Walton and Michael S. Heiser. Walton, Walton, Heiser, Heiser. You can find their stuff on Amazon. They have stuff on the supernatural. Michael Heiser has stuff on the supernatural realm. All of these entities we've been talking about. I've taken a lot of my notes from him. He's got a book on demons, on the supernatural realm. He's got commentaries on Enoch. John Walton goes back and he deals with, he's got some books that deal with the ancient context of Genesis. The one with the serpent is called The Lost World of Adam and Eve. He also has one called The Lost World of Genesis 1 and The Lost World of the Flood. He gives us a different context of looking at these things as literalistic stories. So he's got some great stuff with the ancient Near East studies on that. So if you go with those two guys and start reading them, you can't go wrong. They're the best out there, and I highly recommend their stuff.
Cool. And I got a little surprise for everybody too, since in celebration of next week for Zeke to give a little reading from his books to tease you all. There's a different song. There's no video, but I'll be playing the song at the end of the live stream. It's a good one that'll go along with the topic of evil and horror and haunted and all that. So,
yeah,
I think you're going to enjoy it.
You guys can't hear me vaping, can you?
No.
Okay, cool.
It don't matter. I'm vaping.
Do it live.
Yeah, but whenever you hear nothing but like, shh, it get kind of annoying. But yeah, wonderful stream, wonderful information. I saw a notification up talking about the Book of Enoch, and I was like, that like sparked my attention, but I was doing something at the time. I wasn't able to show up, but I think that's a wonderful subject.
Yeah, man. We started doing it Sundays at 8 Eastern. Just kind of going through and teaching through it because it's never taught on. So I was like, well, somebody needs to teach on this, so it might as well be me.
Right. Yeah.
And it coincides good with what we're talking about here, so it paints a nice little picture.
Oh yeah, it all ties together really well.
So, but yeah, just to recap tonight, the serpent in the garden.
Oh, hold on, Z.
Yep.
Another question first.
Oh, okay.
Spotted Ghost says, I have a question. As investigators, we try to communicate with spirits. Is it possible to communicate with the devil?
I'd say possible, yes. Highly unlikely. Yeah.
Can I answer that too?
Yeah.
We'll see. Whenever it comes to things like that,
we're not worth.
We're gonna have to talk about evoking and invoking.
Yeah.
Right?
Good point. Yeah.
And to essentially to evoke is to force it to come to you, and an invocation is it you being like inviting it to, and it can come if it wants. That's the only way that you're going to get even close to contacting anything like that of that nature. And it's going to have to be through meditation. It's going to have to be through a lot of different I don't think that it's going to be, I don't think the equipment that we have can really capture those specific entities. Those specific entities are on an entire another level. They know what that equipment is. They're obviously too good for it. They're not going to have anything to do with it. They're going to talk to you directly, very directly.
They don't play that little game. They hit you head on.
Right.
Yeah, and to just kind of go along with what Brandon is saying, we talked about these high level ranking spirits like that, like the Watchers and the Fallen Angels. Like, they usually don't. That's usually not their role.
Right. They're not going to be lingering around. They're not going to be something that you can, pick up randomly on a recorder or take a picture of, or you can communicate. Yes, you can communicate. But as far as collecting evidence as a paranormal investigator, no, I would say not.
And then
unless it really, 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 really loved you. But I mean, I don't know.
And then he says, I've heard stories of people summoning the devil through the Ouija board. Is it more likely to be a bad spirit?
It's most likely to be someone's overly religious grandmother that is probably calling the device in your hand or you a devil. Or it could be somebody, a mimic, or no, I'm sorry, my apologies, a trickster spirit that's just trying to scare you, saying that it is the devil. It is not the devil.
Yeah,
it is not the devil.
I would agree with that. Contacting the actual Satan or one of these high-ranking beings is highly unlikely with a Ouija board. You're going to be contacting something different, whether it's a spirit. I've seen some bad stuff conjured up with a Ouija board, some very negative entities. It's just the problem with the Ouija board is if you're doing that and you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what you're contacting. It's just so many things that can go south.
Yeah.
But yeah, contacting, and a lot of times you have to realize too, a lot of times when people say devil, they may mean demon. And that's interchangeable terms in our culture as well. But yeah, actually contacting the Prince of Darkness through a Ouija board.
Yeah. He's got better things to do than yeah.
Yeah.
He's got world destruction on his mind, not one particular person playing with the board.
Right. There is a demon that does come through the Ouija board more clearly. I'm not talking about Zozo or anything like that. I can't exactly think of it right now at the moment. But there is a pretty high-ranking demon that does like to be communicated through. Well, that probably doesn't like to, but is more willing to communicate to you through divinatory tools like the spirit board. That is possible. But usually it's done through like inner work, like trance work and stuff like that. But whenever it comes to Ouija boards and stuff, I mean, I personally use them. I don't see anything wrong with them. I do know my I do have my plan B, C, D, and F you know, so it's, you know, so it's not like that I'm just, you know, free balling it
Mm-hmm.
either, you know, so um I just don't see the difference between one and a ghost box, you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
And Spotted wasn't here back on the live that we did about uh, fallen angels being demons, but he's wanting you to do just a quick
Yeah,
explanation for him.
I'll touch on that briefly. That's something we're going to look at in more detail later. There was a Christian tradition that developed that the fallen angels were demons. This was a more of a latter development after they got rid and banned the Book of Enoch. But until that time, fallen angels in the Hebrew tradition and in the days of Jesus and in the early church, fallen angels and demon spirits were considered two different classes of entities. All right, the fallen angels were considered the watchers, the fallen watchers that rebelled in Genesis 6, and also the ones that were cast out because they did not judge the nations correctly. These are a lot of the things that Paul refers to in the New Testament as the principalities and powers and rulers and authorities. Right? These high-ranking spirit beings that have a ruling authority. Now, demons in the New Testament period and in that intertestamental period, they were believed to be the dead spirits of the Nephilim or the dead spirits of the most wicked people upon earth. And you see this development of the Enochian tradition in the book of Enoch. And we'll see that where the unclean spirits is what he refers to them. And those of you familiar with the Gospels know that these demon spirits were called unclean spirits. Same phrase, same reference, talking about the same thing as the book of Enoch. And in Enoch, the demon spirits were the spirits of the Nephilim. Right? They were disembodied spirits of these human angel hybrids, and that's why they crave a body to enter so much. Or you see them abiding in bodies and having to be cast out in the New Testament, so much so that they hate the disembodied existence that they beg Jesus to cast them into a herd of pigs. They would rather be in a herd of pigs than be disembodied or have to go back to the pit. They're begging Jesus in that instance not to send them back to the pit. And so early tradition, early interpretation was that fallen angels and demons were two different things. This got conflated later on, started this huge tradition in the church that demons and fallen angels are the same thing. But thanks to the rediscovery of the book of Enoch and its influence on the New Testament, scholarship is taking a turn in that direction and bucking against the teaching that fallen angels are demons. The problem is it probably won't be another 50 years before this trickles on down into any sort of mainline church or denomination. And if you mention that today, you're going to get looked at like you're crazy. I would know. It's happened. But the scholarship is there. The proof is there when you study these texts. Fallen angels, the watchers, and demons are two different entities. But yeah, Spotted Ghost, that's a good question. So thank you.
Oh, man.
I love talking about demons.
Yeah, all of this is just incredibly fascinating.
It is. I agree.
All very cool stuff. We got any other questions, y'all?
No, and I'm gonna have to wait and use that song for your part of your intro next week because I was looking on there and I guess I accidentally deleted it when I was revamping our channel here.
Okay. Oh well.
Which bites because it's called Annabelle and it's got Chucky in it, Annabelle, I think Freddy and Jay. It's got a bunch of them in there. That
There's Theo. Come out and say hi. She hasn't been on camera in a while. I don't think she's feeling loved. We'll give Theo some love. My haunted doll. Tell her hello.
Okay, we can do it. Keep her on there. I'm gonna do it this way for you. just for her, since you brought her out, I'm gonna do it this way. Turn the volume up. Oop.
Hi, my name is Annabelle, and welcome to my tea party. Okay. Yes? Whose balloon is this? It's mine. Oh, Penny, can you pass on the Ouija board for me? I am Belle. Can't you tell? Oh, by the way, have you met Chucky yet?
Yo, what's up, bro?
Theo gives it 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add it. It'll be a lot more clear. But my favorite part is you are going to hell, and then it just goes, with the Annabelle, then it, the clown from It, and then oh my God, I love it. You got to wait till you hear the whole thing. I'll set it up to a good video if you send me a bunch of pictures of her.
Okay.
I'll do a big old video kind of slideshow music video for you for that.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Oh, it's awesome. I came across that and I was like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, Theo's going to like it too. So.
Yeah, Brandon was like, it's like an Annabelle rave.
Yeah, it does. For sure. Well, y'all, that's all I got for tonight.
Cool. And
Yeah, some pretty deep stuff for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like it. I mean, I personally like it.
we're gonna keep chipping away at it, y'all. Just a little bit at a time. We'll get there.
and I'm gonna do a intro for someone too in the future using that. It's gonna be perfect for him using the Annabelle theme.
Sweet.
But yeah, we grateful for everyone that participated and listened to Zeke. We're glad he decided to start doing this for you all.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back again next week looking at those passages in Isaiah and Ezekiel, and also give you some snippets from some of my books and stories. So
Sounds awesome. And just to end it on a good note, when he says his final cue, I'll go ahead and do your guys' favorite never give up video that you all like to watch.
Yep. So Dustin, thank you for helping out, and man in the chat, Brandon, thank you for helping out and asking.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Good questions, man.
Yeah.
And everybody in chat who asked the questions and interacted, thank you all. We
And
appreciate
you're welcome.
everybody.
Spotted Ghost, you're welcome too. We're glad that you find it fascinating.
Yes.
So on that note, here we go.
Is this what giving up feels like? I don't know, I don't know. Tell me, have I lost my mind? Nowhere to go, so far from home. Is this what giving up feels like? I don't know, I don't know. Tell me, have I lost my mind?